Colorado and collars, turning greens and dollars, more bills than the means. Everybody chasing that green.
Peace and bliss to you and yours in every language of your understanding.
More bills than the means. Everybody chasing that green.
We're at Truly Living Well, Center for Natural Urban Agriculture, by the way. This is where we're greeting you from and having this conversation from. We are really grateful to be here as part of this event, as part of this not just historic but very important event, and salute the organizers for bringing us all together. We trust that the time that we have together will be used in the most productive way. So we're going to share a lot of information, but really strive to keep it simple. We're not going to be very technical in terms of astronomical formulas and everything, but to share some basic fundamental components of successful agriculture in an urban area. And really there are two that we're going to focus on. One is more about our community involvement and how we use our resources to build structures like this greenhouse we're going to talk about in a brief moment. But the main one, the fundamental one, is soil. S-O-I-L. That's it. We grow good soil, as some of our teachers tell us. Will Allen and Baba Rashid Nuri, two men that I hear utter that all the time. We grow good soil. As Baba Rashid said, we grow soil and God does the rest. So it's very important, and it's not just important. Even though I used a kind of a religious connotation, it's not important just in a mystical way. It's important because that's where the food is getting fed. That's where it's being nurtured. So this is a greenhouse, and I really want to focus on the greenhouse for a few reasons, because we're talking about urban agriculture. We're talking about the year so-called 2016. We're talking about a year that we are seeing increasing manifestations of global warming, climate change. It's late December right now, and we're in t-shirts and not feeling silly about it. We are in front of plants that usually you wouldn't see growing. We're dealing with changing times in terms of weather. Nothing is steady anymore. Nothing is consistent. Nothing is predictable. In the time of Benjamin Banneker and those people who created the Farmers' Almanacs that we now use, as a side note, just some research you could do. An elder just the other day taught me about a letter that Benjamin Banneker sent to Thomas Jefferson. Check that out. All right, so we're not in that time when there were distinct seasons and the weather was very much predictable. Down to the day and when it's going to rain and all that. It's still that way, but guess what this is forcing us to do, because we now can't rely on Weather Channel for it. We can't rely on the latest model and the prediction. We have to rely now on our intuition. So the people that can so-called predict the weather and get a feeling of what's around the corner so that we can continue to grow food effectively, because we eat all the time, right? Our appetites don't vary with the weather, so we got to have food. That's the imperative. We have to have enough food to feed ourselves and our community, and even to do business in many different ways. That's something that we have taught the world. So that's our birthright, and it only makes perfect sense. So all that to say, it's very important to have a structure that you can use to facilitate that steady weather, steady temperature, keeping it between 60 degrees, and sometimes in a greenhouse it gets very hot. That's why you have fans and a way of ventilating during the daytime. Even in the winter it could get 100 degrees easily by noon, depending on many of the different factors. We need to start thinking today about the ways that as a family, as a community, if it's a community space, even if it's not a community garden that you have, but you as a community, work with someone in your neighborhood that has access to land that has a lot of sunlight and everything, and they can grow, they can grow for everybody, and you support them. There's so many different ways to do it. There are many models out there that I'm sure somebody else, one of the presenters, will even cover in more detail. So we urge you to just research some of those models. The models of community involvement and community development of communal agriculture, basically. Many different ways you can put it, but communal agriculture. Not only do you warm up the space in the wintertime, but you can also cool it down in the summertime in the greenhouse. You can use that space and put something called a shade cloth out to actually bring the temperature down 30 or 40 degrees, right? And so you grow lettuce in the summertime, you know, and feed your community and you know, do your business with the people or whatever. You know what I'm saying? You grow, you know, watercress, you know, in the summertime, in the fall. And you know, watercress is a different thing because it doesn't have to be that cool. But there's so many different things that you can do if throughout the year with a greenhouse structure. So it's just for the winter time, right? But the most important part is the winter, because even foods that thrive in the winter need warmth to germinate and to get to a certain level, right? So again, that's what you're seeing right now. You know, spinach, if it was 3 degrees below zero in here, or if it was, you know, even 20 degrees, this wouldn't germinate in the best way. So we're able to do this, and now I can put it out in the field when I get a window, and then but while it gains its strength, you know, just like a child. Again, life is a farm, you know. So think about a child in the sense of, as a parent, for you parents out there, when you're we're rearing our children, there's a time of protectiveness when they're in the womb. First, when they're in mama's womb, that's what that is, you know. And then when they come out, you still, you know, you keep them close. You know, you shield them from certain things. You slowly introduce them to things, you know. And then there's times when you have to kind of let them kind of taste life for themselves a little bit, just to get a little bite or a little, you know, a little burn, just to see some of reality, right? But what we do with the plants, once we've suckered them inside the greenhouse, we take them outside and what we call harden them off. So we get them ready to be able to get outside in the real world, in the big field, right, with the big boys, and feed the people. You know what I mean? But it's a process. So the greenhouse is important in that process. Another thing, very quickly, is another use of the space is to cure vegetables. You know, to cure things. These are sweet potatoes we just pulled out the field about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and they're curing now. Getting ready for the belly. Next step. Next step is somebody happy belly. But so the greenhouse has different functions. You know, you don't want to use it as a place to store your lawnmower and all that kind of stuff. Speaking of soil, which we're going to talk about next, I'm going to head over to the compost area. This is where we build our soil for the greenhouse. Right here. This is just coconut coir, one of the ingredients. Look like Hershey's chocolate. Coconut coir we put in the soil to help to retain moisture. It's better than the traditional peat moss that people buy from those stores that I don't want to name right now. But it's not that's not sustainable. It comes from a specific kind of tree that, you know, is not like a never-ending supply of. So coconut coir is much better. And other ingredients that we'll get into later. But again, this is the function of the greenhouse. So our greenhouse, we have a slab right here where we can use a clean area to mix stuff, mix soil, and do all kind of things, you know. So again, I really can't stress enough, though, the importance, from my perspective, in this time, in this modern time, with all that we're dealing with changing weather, the importance of finding ways for us to secure and to control the weather, so to speak, or control the temperature, control our growing conditions as much as possible in a natural way, because there's no hydroponics going on right here. This is coming out of the earth, you know, but we're using structures, things like bamboo. You can source bamboo, but bamboo is one of the main, what I'm saying is like a building material that if you don't want to go to the store and buy, you know, pine wood and oak wood and all that kind of stuff, we can find stuff in our environment. Most cities that I've been through have bamboo patches all over the place that people don't use. So that's a building material. That's what I'm stressing. Let's go over to the compost. Well, the next thing we're going to talk about is composting. Again, because the most important component of an agricultural venture that is going to make sense and is going to be sustainable is what? Soil. S-O-I-L. We got to grow our own soil. So this is how we grow our own soil. And I think this is a great example of, again, using practical means. You know, what is in your locale. That's the whole thing about this movement and the reality of agriculture. It was never supposed to be about you gotta ship off to China for something. Or you gotta ship off across the country. That's one of the main voices, or one of the main points of the resurgence in the food movement, I should say, right? Is locally grown food, so we don't have to be going all over the place and messing up the oil peak even more and all kind of stuff just to get some exotic food from across the country. We're growing our own. Well, we have to compost. We have to compost. We have to compost. It's just that echo for a minute. Compost, compost, compost. This composting is the way that we're going to build these communities, and the reason that that's a very practical thing is because we're getting resources from different people. Different people are contributing. His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie once said, each must contribute, right? So this is how you can contribute to your community. Coffee grounds. Because coffee grounds are high in nitrogen, and the main components of compost are nitrogen and carbon. Those are the building blocks, those are the ingredients. So we're finding different ways. The whole purpose, to just be real clear and simple, the aim is to source as many materials that naturally have nitrogen and carbon in them. You know, plant-based materials, you know, compostable materials, obviously, you know what I'm saying, and blend them together. There's many different schools of thought in terms of the ratio, you know, so I urge you to do your own. We operate more in a 1-to-1 or basically a 1-to-1 ratio, but with the understanding that nitrogen melts and loses mass quicker than carbon does. So it's just like cooking greens. You know, if you start with a big pot of collard greens, you know you're going to end up with a quarter pot. So all that has to be taken into mind in terms of proportion, the actual mass, right? So coffee grounds. Over here you can see veggie scraps. You know, we get them from different shops, and we're, you know, processing them right now. So these collard green scraps, you know, so every day you get them, and you work them quick enough, they won't start to smell and everything. You know, because really that's one of those misconceptions about compost that maybe needs to be cleared up. If it's done properly, compost is supposed to smell bad, right? So again, we urge you to do some research. I'm sharing with you some of the fundamentals about urban agriculture. And for me, from my perspective, one of the most beautiful rewards of this work is the natural, the organic, pun intended, building of community. Over here, we visit different fruit shops or restaurants. This is a juice bar. You know, people that have juiceries and people that sell popsicles, they come and bring their compost. And all this goes into the pile. That's nitrogen, heavy nitrogen right there. Got leaves. Again, there's a seasonal thing. So what we, just to be very practical, I'm gonna point to this over here. You can see it from afar, but it's a leaf corral. And we just, you know, that's where we keep stuff. So when in the fall it's abundant, every day you can fill this up 3 times, you know. But that's where we keep your leaves. So this is, again, is just a practical application. Have a place to keep your materials, especially your carbon materials. The nitrogen is something you don't want to, you want to be able to process it very quickly. You don't want to have collard greens in paper bags or in plastic bags out in the summertime for 2 days. It'll send a real nice smell through the whole place. So what you see here is one version of a composting operation or a composting method called a windrow, right? Many people that expound on this in a much more articulate way than I can, that have developed this method. But the basic formula is it's like a lasagna: nitrogen, carbon, nitrogen, carbon, nitrogen, carbon. You know, and you make these long rows. You put PVC pipes or other things in them to help them to breathe, right? And you fork them, you turn them over often. The more you turn over compost, the quicker it develops. It shouldn't take you more than 3 to 4 months to have it finished. And let's take a look at the finished product real quick. I mean, you can see it right here, really. Black like a tar, black soil. Look at this. This is the finished product. Cocoa, chocolate. Enough said.
Collar and collars, turnip greens and dollars, more bills than the means. Everybody chasing that green.